Shalom Aleichem. It's Erev Shabbos Kodesh, Pashas Tildos, and this coming week in Yirtzeh Hashem is Tes Yud Kislev, the Yom HaGeula, and the Yortzeit of the Mitteler Rebbe, Reb Doivber, the son of the Alter Rebbe. So I'd like to share a little history about the Mitteler Rebbe and his period and issues that were taking place then. The Mitteler Rebbe was the one who moved the center of Lubavitch to the city of Lubavitch. The Alter Rebbe was first in Lyozhne and then Liadi, and after he passed away, the Mitteler Rebbe settled in Lubavitch, and the Frierdiker Rebbe already writes the entire story, the history of Lubavitch, the two brothers, and what kind of Avos Yisrael they had for each other, and how special it is. All that's in the Frierdiker Rebbe's Sefer, of course, Sefer Zichronis. And the Frierdiker Rebbe records in his sichos and his letters that the Lubavitch was Chabad, the movement of Chabad was in Lubavitch for 102 years. Till in 1915, the Rebbe Rashab left because of the oncoming enemy to Rostov. The yeshiva, the Lubavitch yeshiva, Teiv stayed longer, and they came to Kremenchuk finally in 1918. But the Rebbe moved already in 1915. Anyway, the Mitteler Rebbe, his connection to the Alter Rebbe was beyond words, was phenomenal. And he had a very good friend named Rebbe Aron Halevi Horowitz, known as from the city of Strashele. He ultimately moved there and set up shop there, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about that and talk a little bit about it. In Chabad, there's a concept called Oisiyas Harav. The actual words that the Rebbe says in his mimer, and then writes it in his mimer, are heilig, are holy. And deviating from those words are considered one's own trip, one's own understanding. And there is the idea of understanding something, but when Chassidim were always careful when they chazer a mimer, when they said a mimer repeating the Rebbe's mimer, they were very careful to try repeating the actual words of the Rebbe so that they don't make up their own words. And why is that? Because the belief is that a mimer chassidus is divrei elikim chaim, it's words of the living God, and the Eibishter HaKadosh Baruch Hu is speaking through the throat and the voice of the tzaddik, of the Rebbe. So if you interject your own words, it's not the Eibishter coming through those words. It's your own machshav, it's your own thought, your own seichel, your own intellect. And you could be a fine person, and a good person, and a smart person, and everything is gewaldic, it's great. However, it's not the Rebbe. It's not the tzaddik. This week we had Rosh Chodesh Kislev, and Dr. Weiss always repeats how when the Rebbe said the mimer, the heart, the monitoring of the heart was much better, compared to the sichos. There's something happening, Baruchnius, spiritually, that impacts the gashmius of the physical Rebbe saying the mimer. And we know stories throughout the generations of Lubavitch, of Chabad, how the mimer was the recipe for tremendous bracha and atzlocha and godliness and tshuva and everything else. Well, the Mitteler Rebbe's style of writing chassidus and saying chassidus was very, very elaborate. Mitteler Rebbe is called the Bina of Chabad Chassidus. The Alter Rebbe is the Chochmah, the Mitteler Rebbe is the Bina. Bina is the idea of Rechoivas HaNoar, the broadness of the river. A river, a mayon, a well, is very it's a drop. It's a, when the Mayan expands, it becomes a part of a river. It's expansive. So the Mitteler Rebbe represents expansion, which is the idea of bina, because bina means to expand on an akuda, on a point, on an idea. So an idea is very small, it's a germ, it's a nucleus, and you take that nucleus and you develop the nucleus and you get an idea. And that's the idea of bina compared to chachma. So the Mitteler Rebbe did that with his father's Maimorim, his father's discourses. His good friend, his best friend, who was his chaver Nemon, his dear loyal friend, Rebbe Aron, who was a Talmud of the Alter Rebbe for 30 years, finally said, after the Alter Rebbe passed away, he said, this is not the way to say Chassidus, to write Chassidus, because the expansion of so much words that you write the Maimer of the Alter Rebbe, you're losing the Alter Rebbe's words. We can't tell in the Maimer what's your words and what's the Alter Rebbe's words. And hence, this is not the approach. That was one complaint and disagreement that Rebbe Aron had against his friend, the Mitteler Rebbe. The second one was that the Alter Rebbe speaks about moich shalat al-lev, mind over matter, and that the hispilus hamidus, the emotionalism of the heart, should be guided by the mind. Now the Mitteler Rebbe took this and he put the emphasis in a way on the seichel, on the intellect. The Rebbe Aron of Strashele, who knew very well the Alter Rebbe Shita, of course, for some reason he felt that the emotions should be more forthcoming. So they had a disagreement there too. I'm simplifying it and not elaborating because it's an entire discussion and we don't have the time for it now. But basically, this caused a big rift. These two disagreements, and the Mitteler, and in a way, the Rebbe Aron of Strashele wanted to be the next Rebbe. He felt that his friend, the Mitteler Rebbe, is not conveying properly the teachings of the Alter Rebbe, so he should be the Rebbe after the Alter Rebbe passed on. Well, of course, Lubavitcher Chassidim did not go for that. He's the son and he's the Rebbe. But nevertheless, Rebbe Aron moved to a city called Strashele and he set up shop there. And he was a Lubavitcher, and he wrote the Sefer Avodas HaLevi, and he said Chassidus, and he had Chassidim. Don't think he didn't have Chassidim, he had Chassidim. Now, when thinking about this, I asked once Rabbi Yoel Kad, Shpia, does he have any insight on this whole disagreement? He said, something that we didn't hear Chassidim talk about, he does not know, and really we shouldn't delve into that parsha, because we don't know, we don't have facts. So I don't have really many more facts, but it's adequate to say that what we could take from it, one idea is that the Mitteler Rebbe, being the Alter Rebbe's son and the continuation of the Alter Rebbe, he substantiates and dictates what is Lubavitch, what is Chabad. And this is an important lesson today. You might have very smart people and very smart Chassidim and very committed people in Chassidim. But if they deviate from what the Rabbeim call for, it's not the derech of the Chabad Lubavitch Rabbeim. That's it. Now, it's not that and who's to say what is, what isn't? Nechza Sefer V'Neisa. Let's take out the books, read for yourself, and you'll know. And if you're not clear, go to 3 Rabbonim, 3 Mashpiyim, like the Rebbe said. But the point is that on a day like this, meaning the day of the Chag HaGeula of the Mitteler Rebbe, when we celebrate him as Nossi, and then his Yartzeit, and we celebrate his accomplishments, we have to know that what sometimes doesn't seem to be what you think is the Rebbe's approach, but if the succeeding Rebbe says it is, azoy is das. That's the way it is. No negotiations. And today, I would say that most Lubavitchers, if not all, everyone knows that Rebbe is our Rebbe, and he continues to be our Rebbe. And he not only left us with so much writing and teachings, but he's actually teaching us and guiding us if we were just to listen and open up our eyes and our ears and follow and not want to do our own stuff. So in Mela, once it comes a day like this, Yud Kislev, and the Mitteler Rebbe's Chassidim were big maskilim. Not all, but some were. They were big maskilim. You know, they learned deep Chassidus. And Mitteler Rebbe wrote select svarim for this chassid, for Kushi Lepler, and for this chassid. In other words, and you take a look in Rebina and other svarim, Pirush Hamilas, you're talking about the deepest ideas of Chassidus, and to understand it, it's so difficult. I heard that once from a bacher, he was cleaning for Pesach. He was helping in Rabbi Avram Mayor, Avram Drizen's house, the Mashpir Rabbi Avram Mayor, and he was helping him clean for Pesach. So he was taking the svarim out, and he noticed 2 Imre Binas. So he said to Rabbi Avram, "Why do you have 2? One is enough." So Rabbi Avram said, "That's for my chavrusa Rabbi Yoel Khan. He and Rabbi Yoel had a chavrusa for a while in the Imre Bina." Now you understand what we're talking about. Rabbi Yoel Khan, Rabbi Avram Mayor, 2 both, big maskilim in Chassidus, and what are they learning? Imre Bina. So it shows you the level of Chassidus and depth in the Mitteler Rebbe's Chassidus. So too we find that in the Mitteler Rebbe's Chassidus there's a lot of avodah. For example, for Chodesh Elul, Friedrich Rebbe already instructed, and even the Bachar in 770 had a zettel, a note on the wall, to learn the Derech Chaim, which is the Mitteler Rebbe's Chassidus, and it has a lot of avodah for tshuva. And he speaks about, crying for your avodas. I mean, the Rebbe already said in Tafshir Memvav, Pashas Vayishlach, and I think the Ma'im Maragel Bapumah, if I remember correctly, that avodah of Meridus with B'chi is finished. Now it's the avodah of Simcha. I'm not talking about that. But the fact is that in the Mitteler Rebbe's Chassidus, there is just gems of avodas. It's not just Haskalah. You understand? So, Rabbi Say, we need to learn Chassidus. We need to harav in Chassidus. And it has to bother us a day that we don't learn proper Chassidus. Even if you're busy. You're a shliach, you're a businessman, you have other obligations, but this is ongain. This is a Yiddish. At least it should bother you when you say Krishma Shalamit at night. You should say, "Oh, I didn't get a chance to learn Chassidus, to think Chassidus, to try to understand the Vart Chassidus." You understand? So this is why I'm taking a little time to talk about the Mitteler Rebbe and his accomplishment and what he wanted of Chassidim. And he wanted, when he said, when 2 Chassidim meet each other, they should talk about Yehudi law. Could you imagine you're walking down the street in Borough Park, in Crown Heights, in Flatbush, in Manhattan, Los Angeles, Chicago, in China, wherever you are, and you meet a friend, another Lubavitcher. So besides saying Shalom Aleichem, Aleichem Shalom, you say, "No, what do you learn in the Maimer? What's the pshat here? What do you think about this?" No, that's what he wanted. And he's our Rebbe. Meaning, what do you mean he's our Rebbe? Our Rebbe is our Rebbe, but he is the Rebbe. He's the way he's the Mitteler Rebbe going through the Rebbe, as the Rebbe said in the first year of his Nesias. So Rabbi Yisrael Chevre, mit sich nehmen zu the Beiner, we have to get our act together and learn Chassidus and harav in Chassidus and fabring together. And it's a Yom Geula. It used to be by Chassidim, they fabring only twice a year. You know that? Yud Kislev and Yud Tes Kislev. That's it. That was the official, because it was Chag Geula. Other times they made a Kiddush, made a L'chaim. Fabrengen was known as those 2 days. And Taka, you see that in the Hayoim Yoim. They should help, they should have a Chassidische Shabbos, a Gewaldige Shabbos, and prepare ourselves for these days, so that when Tes and Yud Kislev Taka come, we should go into them with a Simcha and a Freilichkeit, and an inner transformation, and bring the Gula Shleima B'Korev Mamish. Good Shabbos.